Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 153 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your host, Neelan, and with me as always are my hosts, we're all just hosts, Kellen and Mark, the red and green tanks. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello, red and green. We're getting so close. 1 week
Christmas
away.
time.
Yeah.
Holly jolly.
Happy Christmas.
If only the orange tank wasn't here to screw up the Christmas colors.
Yeah, we could do an episode. What's to stop us? Two bros going at it, just red and green, intertwined, like a beautiful Christmas candy cane.
I like that we're intertwined.
No one would want to see that. We've had 2 years to do this. At no point has there been any clamoring for the red-green pairing.
Well, it would be kind of like just a normal episode because you don't talk anyway.
Wow. May as well not even be here. This week on the show, we're going to be doing a retrospective of 2020. We're going to be looking back on how this mad, crazy year has kind of changed our perspective on board games, how it's going to affect the way that we play board games going forward. We're going to be looking back at some of the board games that most surprised us and most disappointed us. That is coming up later in the show. Before we get there, let's talk about the games that we've been playing. And this week, we're going to be talking about Paris. We're going to be talking about Fox in the Forest. And we're going to be talking about Cthulhu Wars Duel.
Duelicious.
Mark, why don't you take us away with our first game?
Neelan, sorry, we can take this part out, but you said that we're going to be looking back, but one of the tenets of the podcast is that we don't do that aforementioned thing of looking back.
That's a good point. Sorry, we're going to be looking forward to the games we played this past year.
Yeah.
But looking way.
Yeah, exactly. Looking
in
forward
front.
into...
We're facing forward, but our head is like turned back. So we're looking... We're facing forward. No, we're pointed
that
forward.
doesn't work because we're still looking back then, Mark.
We're positioned forward, but we're looking back. But we're definitely positioned forward. We're
Can you
not
draw a
positioned
diagram for me, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, here we go. I'm taking you away to Gay Paris with Paris. Paris is a game by the designing duo I talked about a few episodes ago, Kramer and Kiesling. This is one of their 2020 releases. Paris is a medium, light medium area control game. It's got a bunch of different things going on, but I would say the number one mechanism is area control. It's also got some resource management, some drafting, a little bit of push your luck. What you do in Paris is you've got this wonderful circular board, which is cool, with a little Arc de Triomphe in the middle of it. You ever heard of the Arc de Triomphe, Kellen?
Is that bigger or smaller than Gay Paris?
It's in Gay Paris, so it is smaller, therefore. It is contained within.
I almost went there for work, but then they said, wait a minute, you don't get paid enough to go on the international shoot.
That's too bad.
And I didn't get to go.
That's sad. That's a sad state of affairs. What you're doing in Paris is pretty simple. It's got, as I mentioned before, Kramer and Kiesling are really good at these minimal rule sets, and Paris is no different. On your turn, you're doing two things, basically. The first thing you're doing is, if there is a building tile available, you're placing it on the board. So, Paris, as depicted in the game, is split into 6 neighborhoods. When you are placing a tile, you're picking them randomly from a stack. All you know is which of the neighborhoods the tile is going to go into. So they have the neighborhood's name on the back of the tile, but you're not sure where they're going to be positioned in the neighborhood. But you're picking a tile, and you're placing it in the corresponding neighborhood, and the tile may have a building of one of 6 values. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 8. And so you're placing your building down, and then you're taking an action. So the action can be one of 3 things. Very simple. One is to place a key. So you've got a number of keys to start the game. You can place a key either on the bank space associated with a neighborhood or on the arc. So either on the Arc de Triomphe or on one of these banks in the neighborhoods. If you place your key on the bank in a neighborhood, you get the corresponding amount of money that is printed on that bank. You also are locking that key into that neighborhood. So that key will go into that neighborhood. So that's part of the area control situation. That's one action you can do, place a key. The other thing you can do is to move a key that you've previously placed either from a bank in a neighborhood or from the arc into
the prison.
Is this a Les Miserables joke?
Yeah.
Oh, what? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Good.
I'm a man of culture.
Yeah, no, I understand. So if you place the key from the bank, you must place it in a building in the neighborhood. Now, placing it in a building, each type of building has a corresponding bonus or cost. So all the ones, regardless of which neighborhood you're in, all the one buildings give you a bronze prestige star, and they will allow you to move across the bonus track. Every 2 building gives you a silver prestige star and allows you to go along the bonus track. Every 3 building gives you a gold prestige star and lets you go around the bonus track at a cost of 2 francs. Every 4 building doesn't allow you to travel along the bonus track, but gives you a wood resource. The 5s give you a marble resource, and all the 8s give you a gold resource, but to place in the 8, you must use a wood. So the resource management is very simple. There's only a couple resources, and they're used in basically one way. All the wood is used to build the 8 buildings. All the marble and gold is used to build these prestige buildings, which is something else. But there's not a lot of needing resources for a lot of different things. They have one use to them. And again, all the 1 buildings are the same. All the 5 buildings are the same across the different neighborhoods. And there's no cost to place aside from either the wood for the 8 buildings or the 2 francs for the 3 buildings. So again, very simple in terms of how much it costs to place into a building. But so that's the action you can do. You can move a key from the bank in a neighborhood to a building in that neighborhood, or from a building in the neighborhood to another building in the neighborhood, as long as it's increasing. So if you placed your key on a 2 building now and you want to move it, you could move it to a 3, 4, 5, or 8. You can always increase. You can never go back. Like us, we never go back. In Paris, you can never go back. And finally, last option you have is if all the building tiles have been taken and they've been exhausted, then you can take an end game tile. So this is the counter for the end of the game. And these are little French flags. You can go through them. They all have a bonus on them. So if there's no more building tiles to take, you can take one of these and get a reward, some sort of resource or some victory points or something. But once those are all taken, the game is over. So there is the opportunity, if you're in the lead or you figure it's in your best interest, you can try to speed up the game by taking these end of game tiles. So things that I really enjoy in this game is it's a game that's very heavy on tempo, which is, again, one of my favorite things when it comes to games, because when you start your turn by placing a building in a neighborhood, in order to place your key on that building that may be a good building, you must have already placed the key there. So there's an aspect of, if you take a building for a specific neighborhood, you want to make sure that you already have a presence there. You already have a key there ready to jump on it. Because if you don't, then your opponent may be able to do that. Furthermore, there's another tempo aspect where you can place a key in a bank in a neighborhood, and when you do, you get money, but you're, as I said, locking it in that neighborhood, so you're stuck committing there. Whereas if you place a key on the Arc de Triomphe, you get no money, but that key can go anywhere. So it gives you flexibility at the cost of money, which is hard to get in the game. So there's that give and take of do I want to have flexibility or do I want to commit and get money as my compensation for committing? The other tempo thing that's wonderful, and this is the thing, again, that's in Francis Drake that I really, really like, is that this bonus track. So the bonus track starts with really small rewards at the beginning of it, like a single wood or a single stone or a single prestige star. All the way to at the end, you've got the scoring conditions. You've got if you get the tile that's at the end of the track, you can get a bunch of points if you've met certain conditions. They're sort of game end ways to score. And they're very, very desirable. You can tell that you can score a lot of them if you get that tile. But there's the whole thing where whenever you get an opportunity to move down the bonus track, you can, again, like us, you can only move forward. You can not move back. So you can go as far as you want. On that very first opportunity to go down the bonus track, you could go grab that great tile at the end, but then you can never grab anything else. So you have to figure out, do I need to jump ahead, grab something I really, really want, but then leave everything else behind for my opponents? There's that give and take. There's other stuff to the game, but it's very good. It's a very, very good game. It's not the best game I've ever played, but it's just got that wonderful, very easy rule set. You know how to play it rather quickly, and it's just really, really well designed. Again, it's not going to knock your socks off. It's not the best thing ever, but it's an absolutely solid game. The presentation is wonderful. I love the bonus track mechanism. I love that one-way travel thing. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Paris by Kramer and Kiesling.
I've said this before, but I think, like you say, the presentation of the game is pretty stunning. I'm looking at pictures of it now, and it's just quite striking. I like a round board. It stands out. Also, that mechanic you described, I'm familiar with it from their game Heaven and Ale, where you can go as far as you want to get bonus. I love that so much. Yes. I'm so
Francis
excited
Drake.
that
we got to play Francis Drake. We have to play Francis Drake.
I have to at some point. Yeah. Very cool. I am very intrigued by this. I'm going to have to try to get a game of this with you at some point.
Yep. So, is this heavy enough? Because it seems like a lot of people are saying, oh, it's not as heavy as I wanted it to be, which I take as a positive. And B, is it interactive enough? Because if it's like light enough, but there's enough going on that every time we duke it out, we're going to have a great time with it.
Sure. I saw the comments about the game being too light. I don't think it's that light. It's certainly not like a lightweight game. It's midweight. I would hesitate to play this with non-gamers because of the weight. It's really not that light. It's not going to fry your brain, but I think it's fine. It's not overly interactive, but there is definitely some, for lack of a better term, like antagonism there. Another thing I forgot to mention, actually this is a really cool part of it that is, again, another tempo thing that is sort of gets to the fightiness of it, is when the fourth key is placed in any neighborhood, then whoever placed that key gets to assign the victory points for area majority to any neighborhood in the game. So, for example, if I'm the only person in one neighborhood, I'm the only person there, so I'm likely to win the area control there. And we are all duking it out in another neighborhood, but Kellen is, say, winning that one, and we're all fighting for it. But if I place the fourth key in that neighborhood that we're fighting over, I get the right to assign victory points to any neighborhood I want, and in that case, I would probably assign it to my neighborhood, the one that I'm winning in. And the victory points you assign decrease as the game goes. So if you get to place that very first one, the reward for winning a neighborhood is going to be quite high. And if you place the last one, it's going to be low. And there's a chance, because the keys are a finite resource, there's a chance that a neighborhood that everybody's fighting over and struggling over won't even score for area majority. So it's another like really cool tempo, wait, and then strike sort of thing, which is
Gotta
not
lock
direct.
It in.
Right, exactly.
Lock in those points. That's why it's called Paris, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's perfect translation from the Parisian to the, or from the French to the English. But yeah, so not direct interaction, but definitely a lot of like watching what your neighbors are doing and jumping in front of them. So that is Paris by Kramer and Kiesling.
So I've been playing a 2-player trick-taking game called The Fox and the Forest. Now, Mark spoke about the cooperative version of this a couple of months ago. This is the original competitive version on which Fox and the Forest Duet is based. So for those who don't know what a trick-taking game is, very briefly, you deal out a hand of cards, and those cards are in multiple suits. In this case, there are 3 suits with cards going from 1 to 11. Someone plays a card to lead the trick, and in the case of this game, the other player has to follow the suit unless they don't have any cards in their hand, in which case they can play any suit. There is a trump suit that is dictated by a card drawn off the top of the deck at the start of the game, and that suit is always more powerful than the card it is competing with. The aim of the game is to be able to win a trick, which in this case is just one card played by both players, and the number of tricks that you win at the end of a round, as dictated by everyone emptying out their hand of 13 cards, is going to dictate how many points you win. There's like a little table that everyone has as a reference, which basically is like, okay, if I win 4 tricks, I'm going to get this many points. If I win 7 tricks, I'm going to get this many more points. But at either end of those scales, if you get too many tricks, you're going to get 0 points. If you manage to get 3 or less tricks, you're also going to get a lot of points. So there's kind of these determinisms you have to make in terms of, am I going to, using the hand I've received, and am I going to try win a lot of tricks? Am I going to try aim for that very, very bottom rung, in which case I mess up the other player and they get no points and I will get the points instead? So you make those considerations at the start of the round based on the cards you're dealt in order to see how you are going to play out the tricks. The layer on top of all of this is every odd card in the game also has a special power associated with it. So that might be, when you play this card, you get to draw a card and replace it in your deck. Or when you play one of the other cards, you get to swap out the trump suit. The other little wrinkle on this game that I like a lot is, other than the points that you get at the end of the round, the 7s in the game, i.e. of the 3 suits, they also are going to get you points if you win the trick that they're in. So if I play a 7 and I win that trick, I get a point. So there's this element at the start of the game where you look at your hand, you either have a couple of 7s, you think, oh, I could probably win the 7s in this round, and that's going to give you like a fair chunk of the points for the round. In fact, in the most recent game I played of this, I won on the basis of focusing on getting 7s at critical points at the expense of winning tricks. I like that little consideration you have to make at the start, as with most trick-taking games, of how am I going to play out this hand? Like, what is the correct order to play this out in order to maximize the gains I'm going to get for the round? I think 2-player trick-taking games are unusual, so I was surprised that this one worked as well as it did. And I think the layer of special powers I found cool. I found like it interesting to like try to figure out how I was going to use the powers to best serve me in a given hand.
Neelan,
Yeah.
let me ask you this. Does it feel different when you're playing as the forest versus playing as the fox?
You know what? Not substantially, no. I think that the significance of that name is lost on me a little bit. There is a fox in the game. There's one of the powers of the cards, I think. But yeah.
No forest.
No forest. Well, I guess the whole thing is the forest because it's got this kind of like fairy tale woodland theme to it. You know, you have witches and woodcutters, you know, so I think that's the...
What about a hound?
There may or may not be hounds. Maybe. I don't remember, which is, I feel like to some extent, like injecting theme into a game of this sort is somewhat lost on me, or I would imagine most people. Like, I don't think you're coming to this game for the theme, but it has a pretty neat, clean, simple rule set.
Mark, have you played both of them?
I have not.
The duet and the regular?
Only duet.
So we have half the knowledge on different quadrants of this
That's right.
computer screen.
We have half the knowledge on all 4 quadrants.
I will say that this made me super excited to try the cooperative version because I was very intrigued enough by your description, Mark, of Duet to like pick this up. And to be perfectly honest, like I think I've said this multiple times on the podcast, trick-taking games aren't necessarily my jam. They're not my favorite thing. So I enjoyed this in the context of what it was, which was a simple 2-player card game. But the idea of layering the cooperative element on that, as the crew does and as Fox and Forest Duet does, is a lot more interesting to me. But yeah, I think that this is a very inexpensive game and one that is easy to teach, especially if you or a partner are more into the idea of simple card games. And that is the Fox and the Forest. Kellen, what have you been playing?
So, we have actually released a written review of Cthulhu Wars Duel on our website, which we will link to in the show notes. But we had an opportunity to play an advanced copy of Cthulhu Wars Duel, a Sandy Petersen game. So, that's important to remember. Cthulhu Wars Duel is a 2-player, much more inexpensive version of Cthulhu Wars, a Sandy Petersen game. So, Cthulhu Wars is a asymmetric, dudes on a map, meeple on a map, people on a plane, whatever you want to call it game, with very distinct powers and a ton of miniatures. It also costs $200 MSRP for Cthulhu Wars. Cthulhu Wars is in my top 10 board games of all time. I think it's in a lot of our top 50 board games of all time. It is a great, very interesting game about Mr. Cthulhu and friends battling it out on a map to try to get 30 Doom. What makes Cthulhu Wars so interesting is how tight and sharp the action selection is. You have so many action points, and you are playing sort of this chess-like back and forth, where each action you take costs a certain amount of action points, and you're stalling, and you're stalling, and you're trying not to show people what you want to do, and you're trying to conserve power for that moment when you can strike and do something big that they have no way to counteract or fight against you. So, Cthulhu Wars Duel. What is Cthulhu Wars Duel? It is anytime they add the word duel to something, it's a little like, they did it with Cosmic Encounter to horrifying results. Cthulhu Wars Duel takes 2 of the factions from the base game, Great Cthulhu and the Black Goat, and it puts them in a 2-player version of the game with an MSRP of $30. Takes out all the miniatures, puts in cardboard, standees, and it is 80 to 85% identical. It is Cthulhu Wars. It is Cthulhu Wars for 2 players on a smaller board that is not Earth. Who knows where it is, somewhere in Cthulhu land, and you duke it out. But there are some notable big changes. And those changes actually make the game quite a bit different. And I don't know whether it's good or bad, and it'll have to be sussed out together. But I think it's important to cover what those changes are. The first one being what is called decay. In Cthulhu Wars Duel, once a player is out of power, the other player cannot just sit there and take as many actions as they want to over and over again and use the rest of their power. The more turns that one player just passes because they're out of power, the higher the decay goes and the more expensive actions get for the other player. So what that means is you actually don't have very many turns to take, probably up to 3 or 4 at most, before the round must end. So this puts a big change to Cthulhu Wars in terms of the tempo, in terms of you may actually want to start a round by summoning something big to force the other player to have to use their power quicker. So it changes Mark's favorite thing, changes that tempo. The other big change in Cthulhu Wars Duel is that you are not granted Doom, which is the victory points, just for controlling gates in the Doom phase. You have to pay for that Ritual of Annihilation, which used to be a way to double the victory points that you earned, but now you have to do it to earn any victory points. But on the flip side of that, you actually earn victory points when you kill opponents' units. Now, this is a huge change to Cthulhu Wars, because Cthulhu Wars is, in many cases, about achieving your spells, achieving your objectives, unlocking spells, and gathering victory points, but almost trying to not get into combat until you have to. And sort of there are combat does happen, it is a combat-forward game, but in Cthulhu Wars Duel, your victory points are literally tied to monsters that you murder, which is really a big change for Cthulhu Wars. Cthulhu Wars Duel is a very interesting product. It is very inexpensive for what it is. It is so much of what I love about Cthulhu Wars in a smaller package. I've been assured by Peterson Games that more versions of this are coming out with other factions from the base game and from expansions that you can then use in 2-player games. There is no standy version of the 4-player Cthulhu Wars system, which I think is a huge, huge shame. I think it's hard for me. I am not a 2-player gamer very often. I am not sure about these changes, but with a game that is so close to the game you already have, I think any change feels bigger than it perhaps actually is. But for me, someone who's played Cthulhu Wars dozens and dozens of times, I look at this and I go, this is so perfect because it opens up the world. You know, I know there are people listening to the podcast, they've heard about Cthulhu Wars, and they said, well, that's A, that's too expensive, or B, I only play 2-player games. This answers the call very quickly. You now, too, can try a Sandy Peterson game. So good. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Blue Tank here. I was very involved in a stressful game of innovation with Woggers, but I heard you guys talking about Cthulhu Wars Duel, and I just wanted to pop in to say a couple words. Who knows? Did I like it? Did I hate it? Did I win? I did win. I did not hate it. I did love it. So this game feels exactly like Cthulhu Wars, but the stakes feel lower. It feels less stressful, and it's extremely short. So it's kind of like you can get a taste of Cthulhu Wars without spending 4 hours having a Cthulhu war. You can dive right in, and it still has all of those fun individual player powers. It still has the tension of trying to decide which of my spell books do I want to unlock first. The race to finish all the spell books is a little bit different because you don't actually need to have all of your spell books unlocked to win the game. It just unlocks a different version of the game. So like that tension is removed. There are a few points of tension that are removed. Kellen talked about one of them, which is the fact that you're not battling for gates the whole time. And it really does put a stronger focus on just fighting. So we had a lot of fun little skirmishes because that's just an easy way to get points. And points don't come super easily, although it is much more tempting to do a Ritual of Annihilation in this version because, as Kellen said, if you look at your power and you decide, okay, this is the round I'm just going to do, like, I know exactly what I'm going to do and burn through all of my power, including doing a Ritual of Annihilation, they have no choice. They're only going to get a couple actions. So it opens the door for moves like that just made it, I think, friendlier, I would say. So it's a little bit less cutthroat. I loved it. I had a great time. I love 2-player games, though, so it's still a little different. And I know, obviously, Cthulhu Wars, the game, is very expensive. But if you already have Cthulhu Wars, I do think it's totally worth it to have both of them because of how the experiences differ.
You did mention like it being a lot shorter. Did you guys know roughly how long it was? Like, was it in the vicinity of like an hour?
Yeah, it was less than an hour. But I think our games of Cthulhu Wars take about twice as long as most people claim they take.
But I mean, I think if
but
you were
yes,
to say
under
like
an hour,
less than an hour, that's totally
for sure.
That's cool.
You mentioned that you think it felt like lower stakes, Christina. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah.
So that surprised me because when Kellen mentioned that you get points for fighting, that made me feel like that was going to up the stakes. It was going to up the like potential bad feelings, for lack of a better term. Like, oh, I have to fight. No?
To me, that right there lowered the stakes because there were so many fights. Any one fight did not feel as devastating because your guys were just dying and you were bringing them back out. You had the right spell books built in. Like, the game felt designed for that many battles. So it did not feel that punishing to have that many battles. Although I also won, so maybe that's why I feel that way because I had very successful battles.
Yeah, and just speaking to that specifically, like Great Cthulhu is easier to play than Black Goat. So you do have one faction that is a little bit more straightforward and combat oriented and move around the map oriented, and then Black Goat, who is a little more tricksy, a little more do cool stuff with the monsters, but have to figure it out. And it's even weird because Black Goat was just officially buffed for the normal game, and that buff is not present here in the 2-player version. So I think that's a good thing, to be honest, that you give the basic player Great Cthulhu and you give, the more advanced, more cerebral player Black Goat, and then you'll have a fair fight, perhaps.
A fair fight which Christina won?
That's it. We're done.
I had a much kinder interpretation of I was going to admit that Cthulhu is better at battles, but you wouldn't even let me finish my sentence because you had to insult me.
Another question is, you both sort of mentioned that it's like full Cthulhu Wars in a bite-sized package. The changes to the power track, where you can no longer hoard your power till the end, I got the feeling that Kellen felt that was a negative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of my favorite things about Cthulhu Wars is trying to hide what you're trying to do. And in fact, factions are built around, sort of lying in wait, and then you have 12 power and they have nothing, and there's nothing that they can do about it. Whereas this game, you just have to approach it differently. And I think Christina is right to point out that you may even want to do a Ritual of Annihilation, so you start a round with 1 power. Because if you think about the tempo, if they have 10 power, they're going to take a free action. Then it's going to cost them 1 extra power, then it's going to cost them 2, and then 3. So at most, they're going to have 3 turns, and they're going to spend 5 or 6 power just paying the decay cost to go that round. So it makes the action when you summon your Great Old One even more important. Like, which round do you do that? Do you do that in the same round as your opponent, or do you try to do it 1 round before them when they don't see it coming? It does scare me a little bit, and this may be unfounded, having not played it too many times, but with such a strict action point system and starting locations and specific factions, I feel like the first couple of rounds of this, even in multiplayer, can be kind of rote or scripted. And when you get to a 2-player version, I feel like that'll get even more so that way, where there may be like best opening moves for the first couple of rounds, which scares me a little bit.
But I think that this one only comes with the 2 factions, but you can buy additional factions, right?
Yeah, not yet.
You will be able to buy additional factions. And so
at some point in the future, I will be wrong. And that's what she's trying to tell you right now.
No, I'm just saying that's the solve. You can just be different factions.
And scene.
Okay, just real quick to answer Mark's question, because Kellen didn't let me answer. Kellen thought that was a bad thing. I thought that was a good thing, which I kind of already explained. But I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
For everyone listening, don't just listen to Kellen.
Heaven forbid.
This is a great game. Okay, I think that's all for today. I've got to get back to my game. Future Woggers, if you're listening to this, I hope you didn't win. Okay, bye.
So that is going to do it for our coverage on Cthulhu Wars Duel, a Sandy Peterson game. Very excited to have this. It is tough when you own all the other stuff and you've got like a whole closet full of Cthulhu Wars, and it's 80% the same thing, so maybe I just want to photocopy the map and put it in my big Cthulhu Wars box.
I will say this, though, at least for like a slightly different perspective. As someone that really likes Cthulhu Wars, it would be silly for me to also own Cthulhu Wars considering you have all of it. Something like Cthulhu Wars Duel, as someone that's more inclined to play 2-player games, does seem very interesting to me. Like, I could see myself picking that up, potentially.
Yeah, and I think it has sort of that Unmatched comes out, and it's like, hey, wait a minute, no, we could offer Cthulhu Wars, and it is that full experience in a shorter time. There is no question. I think that the big caveat for me is that, like, you lose all diplomacy.
Sure.
Which is, for me, more than 50% of what I enjoy about this type of game.
That's fair. So let's get into our feature topic, which is going to be our looking forward, necks craned behind us, retrospective, but not really, on 2020 and the highs and the lows in the board game scene and how it changed us as people. So I think the best place to start this off is with kind of a look back on what has, by any metric, been a bizarre year, and especially one for a hobby which is defined by one-on-one personalized social interaction. When you entirely remove that from the equation, what does the board gaming landscape look like? We've obviously spoken a lot about the impact of COVID on this year in board games, but like, I'd be curious to see, like, now that we have the year in hindsight, what do you think has been the most notable things about the year and perhaps how it's changed your interactions with the hobby? Kellen, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's impossible to overstate how big of an impact it has. And this isn't a, oh my God, COVID is bad session, but even the entire nature of the podcast has gone remote. And so a huge change to just our workflow and our ability to play games. So for me in my house, the talking about games and the purchasing of games and the researching games has all been at peak 2020. I've got all the time in the world, but then the playing of the games has slowed significantly. And one of the things that stuck out to me, one of the things that people were talking about recently in the Board Game Barrage Discord was a post by Miniature Market, one of the sort of premier online retailers, who has discontinued their deal of the day, and people are saying like, why have you done that? And what they actually said is on December 6th, they said over the past 90 days, we had more items released into this hobby than all of 2019 combined.
That's crazy.
So just a huge amount of releases all happening in 2020. My sort of prediction and thought is that we're kind of in a lost year for a lot of things, and I wonder if the output in 2021 continues in the way that it has gone in 2020. It's going to be hard for any of these games to shine, and we may have some real hidden gems popping up from 2020 in 3 or 4 years when anyone has gotten around to playing all of them. And everyone is going to be doing their top 10 games of 2020, and we didn't even feel like it was perhaps the right call to do that. Because in my opinion, the only people who really the professionals, the people who do this full time, are the people who've really been able to play the 50, 100, 200 games that have come out this year. It's been exceedingly difficult in our situation, and I think in most people's situation, to get to all of these releases.
I'm actually going to take a positive spin on things, although it's inarguable that COVID has had a resoundingly negative impact on not just the board gaming hobby, but the world in general. Obviously, that's clear. But you know what? It's one of those things where distance makes the heart grow fonder, sort of. Like, I am now super, super excited and really looking forward to, like, that first convention back, or gaming with friends again, or recording this podcast in person again. Like, I'm so excited by that as a possibility that it's like created this anticipation in me. I see that first session back, that first convention, as like such an exciting potential that it's just really something that I'm looking forward to. And the other thing is like the more minor stuff, like realizing that we could play these games online. Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator and all these things have been sort of a revelation, at least to me. I know they existed before, but the breadth that they offer of gameplay and games is just really surprising to at least me. So definitely, obviously, a negative year in a lot of ways, but I think seeing what the possibility is and seeing like a return to normalcy in the future, however long that's going to be from where we are now, is just really exciting to me.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an important thing to note, is kind of like how it changes your perspective on just like how valuable the ability to be able to go to a convention and be able to meet up with people and play them is. And, even less so to us, where we have regular board game groups, but a lot of people who derive a lot more value from the perspective of, I'm going to find like-minded people to play board games with, and having that scene disappear, like, it definitely does make me feel like, man, I'm very excited to get back to that, just to like be among lots of like-minded people playing games. And one of the things that's also been interesting by way of necessity is kind of, to bounce off what you were saying, Mark, about the digital landscape. Like, I think that I've not necessarily done as much live Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia as I would expected to at the beginning of the year, but I've done a hell of a lot of like asynchronous, like board game arena type stuff. Like, if I look at my BGA list right now, I'm like in 10 different games simultaneously with people across the Discord, with people in all of my different disparate friend groups. It's this fascinating thing where I've suddenly, like, just by virtue of having this being the only avenue I have for playing games, I'm suddenly now playing a whole bunch of games I probably would never have played, or maybe never have revisited, with people I probably wouldn't have played them with ordinarily. Like, for instance, like, I had been itching to return to The Great Zimbabwe as a game that I'd played once and kind of had a weird first game of, and playing that online has been the perfect avenue to explore that. I played a lot of games of The Great Zimbabwe, weirdly, of all games this year. And that was just cool. Like, being able to have these deep dives with like specific players over and over again, or just bounce between multiple games with the same groups, has been really kind of cool, and something that I actually suspect I will continue to do going into, past the pandemic. It just seems like it's a cool habit, at least from my perspective, that I picked up, that opens a lot more avenues to play board games, even if it's not the idealized sitting at a table playing a board game, which obviously I want to return to just as much as anyone else.
Yeah, BGA, man, talk about lowering the barrier of entry, because you don't even need to know the rules to play the game. I am currently winning a 6-player game of Libertalia, and I don't know the rules. I just click on things, and then when I go, wait a minute, what does the sun symbol mean, or what does the moon symbol mean? And that scripting really does change the way you think about and appreciate certain games, because there's sort of the puzzle on your turn, but then those games where you sit there and continually have to take turns back and forth are a lot less fun.
Right.
So it actually overvalues certain types of games where, if every player gets a 10 or 15-minute turn, that actually might be a benefit in asynchronous board game arena play. Very interesting thing to wrap your head around.
So I think let's dive into actual honest-for-goodness board games that we have played in 2020. And the way that we wanted to frame this, partly I think due to the idea of the absurdity of ranking games in a year that's been abnormal, we just thought we would go into what games most surprised us and most disappointed us for the years. The way that I at least personally perceive, and I think both of you jump in if you see this slightly differently, is both of these are sort of like a measure of the distance between expectation and result, right? I had very high expectations for X game, but on the first play, it kind of did not live up to the expectation. That would be a huge disappointment for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I agree.
So I think with that said, Kellen, why don't you kick us off with your best surprise of 2020?
Best surprise. Biggest, Nealon, the Delta.
Biggest
the
surprise.
Delta,
Biggest surprise.
Well, it's funny because it actually, or technically, it's not between what I expected when I started playing it, but it's just more like I was surprised. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it's like My Little Pony, Raiders of Scythia. If you didn't expect to like it and then that was a 7 out of 10, that would be different than... Do you see what I'm saying?
That's true.
That all makes sense.
That will make
You tracked
sense.
what I just said?
I think so. I think you're trying to say that you're measuring this slightly differently in terms of where your expectations were for the game in question?
No, so I had researched the game and had good expectations, but it was still a surprise.
Got it.
As opposed to My Little Pony Raiders of Scythia.
Got it.
Great. So the biggest surprise of 2020 may not be a surprise to you. This is Beyond the Sun. This is Rio Grande's new tech tree game. Probably my favorite game of 2020, but I don't know that I'm ready to declare that yet because there are so many great games from 2020 to talk about and try. But in Beyond the Sun, you are researching new technology, you are fighting over planets, you are doing it all in a very, very streamlined system. For as sprawling as this board is, your turn is lightning quick. You are making an action selection. You are choosing which of the resources that you want to generate on your player board, and it's boom, 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 players taking turns. There is a lot of variety in this game in terms of what achievements are available to you, the order in which the technologies come out. This has flavors of innovation in it. It is much more restrained than innovation. This came out of nowhere for me. This felt like Kellen in his second year of board gaming and a new release was coming out. No one had heard of it. I hadn't heard of it. I'd never heard of the designer, a rock-solid publisher. Very excited to have Beyond the Sun in the collection. Eager to see if they do any expansions for it and what they do to that, because I would love it. I would love it. I would love it. I would love it if they went the way of Root, where when Root added the Exiles and Partisan expansion deck, which said, there's the base game for ye Euro lovers, and now we're going to go crazy for ye Cosmic Encounter lovers. I would absolutely love it if this is the direction that Beyond the Sun went, to say, hey, wait a minute, we can unlock these powers, let's get wacky, let's get wild. I think there is a lot of opportunity in the system, but with that said, it is great as is. I still think I have many more plays to come of Beyond the Sun. Very excited to have it in my collection.
This could easily have been the game I chose as well. I didn't think I necessarily had any expectations going in, except once you described it, I kind of had a feeling I was going to dig it. But I was still very surprised to see how much I liked it and how much in the wheelhouse of the games I like it ends up being. I can't wait to play more of this. Mark, what was your best surprise?
My biggest surprise is a game I talked about a couple episodes ago. Although it was on my most anticipated list, as I mentioned when I was reviewing it, that anticipation and that excitement sort of went down before I finally got a chance to play Red Cathedral. But I was really pleasantly surprised by how fun the game was, and again, how much bang there was for such a small box. Bang for the box. That's another trademarked Board Game Barrage term.
I came up with that.
You did not come up with that. Don't you dare.
Check the Discord.
You couldn't
Check
even
the
remember.
Discord. Are they
coming
saying?
up with it.
Yeah, no, they attributed it to me, Mark.
Oh my. Okay, well, I got
All
the outro.
good things.
I got
All
the outro
good
for this
things.
episode. I got the outro for this episode as me saying it for the first time. I just go back to last episode. Perfect. Great.
Bang for the box.
That was a
Bang for the box.
See, I attributed
Bang for the box.
I attributed it to BGB, and
You
yet
can't
you
go
came
back.
in here to try to
Can't go
steal
back.
my glory. But yes, no, Red Cathedral is an engine builder with a shared rondelle. Really, really satisfying the way that you ramp up and that your engine gets stronger and stronger. It's just a really fun game with a lot of cool aspects to it. There's a area majority aspect. There's tempo that is a consideration. There's a lot of things that I like that this game has, and I was very pleasantly surprised by Red Cathedral.
My biggest surprise for the year, and I think I should caveat this by saying that the US release of this was this year. So I believe the German release would have been sometime towards the end of last year, probably at Essen. But my biggest surprise was Nova Luna for a couple of reasons. I feel like it kind of came out of nowhere for me a little bit. I don't know how this one passed me by, but I remember when we were at Dice Tower West and Kellen passes me the box and is like, oh, there's a new Uwe Rosenberg puzzle game that uses the patchwork timing system. And I was just like, I love all of the words you just said. Can we play this right now?
Thank you, Kellen, for bringing that
Thank you,
to
Kellen. We played a couple of games of this at Dice Tower West and loved it. It is such a phenomenal game. It takes what is one of the coolest mechanisms from Patchwork, like I said, which is this idea that the next player is always the person who's furthest behind in time. So there's not a strict turn order. It depends on the tiles that you draft, which determines who goes next. And what you're trying to do is collect tiles to place them onto your grid in order to create specific combinations and patterns, which is going to get you effectively a victory point. And the first person to get to X number of victory points wins the game immediately in like a pure race game sort of fashion. I don't necessarily love the aesthetics of this. It's kind of weird looking. I'm not quite sure what they were going for with the theme of it, but I think it is such a satisfying puzzle and such a satisfying system built on pretty simple ideas. It's kind of the thing that Uwe Rosenberg does really well. Kind of the same thing that he did when he surprised me with New York Zoo. He takes his previous ideas and combines them in ways that you think like, that's probably not going to work as well as it should. And then this is crazy. Like he just took this idea from this game and this idea for this game and blend them together. And it still ends up feeling different from both of the original sources.
You know, it's funny when I'm at work and I copy paste different slides from different PowerPoints into one PowerPoint. People don't like it, and they don't think it's revolutionary.
Yeah, it is. It's funny how being a legendary game designer sort of flips that whole idea on its head a little bit. But that is Nova Luna, an amazing game that I would highly recommend, perhaps more expensive than it should be. But if you can find this at a reduced price, absolutely worthwhile.
And it has a moon meeple.
It has a little moon meeple, which is advertised in the box very proudly. Moon meeple included. That is Nova Luna. So let's get straight into our biggest disappointments of 2020. Kellen, what was yours?
So here we go back to the aforementioned Board Game Barrage way of arguing about the category as opposed to arguing about the thing. So we've got two here, which is, it's hard to say which one is a bigger disappointment because one is definitely a bigger disappointment, and that is Tang Garden, because it's horrible. And the other is a big disappointment because it is the reworking of an amazing game called Trois as Trois Dice, and that is a huge disappointment from someone putting the name Trois on a box and handing it to me. So that was a huge disappointment. So it's hard to say. It is a good game. It is a decent game versus Tang Garden, which is horrible. So it's hard for me to evaluate which one is a bigger disappointment. Tang Garden has huge following, a huge Kickstarter, just the most beautiful, garish, over-the-top production in a tile-laying game that is way overcooked, way hard to read. The iconography is bad. The scoring is annoying. Everything about it is annoying. You're having to literally look at which direction your little characters are facing and rotate them around inside of pagodas. I could not be more happy to have closed the box and never gone back to Tang Garden. Twa Dice is a decent roll and write game that does not borrow enough from its elder sibling, Twa, one of my favorite games of all time. I actually think that per the strict reading of the category that we do here on the Board Game Barrage podcast, the answer to this question actually has to be Twa Dice, even though I think it is a fine roll and write experience. So disappointed.
Mark, what was your disappointing game?
So this is technically a 2019 release. I don't know if that means it's got 2019 in Germany and in 2020 here or whatever, but I played it this year. It's close enough. I haven't talked about this on the podcast yet, but Crystal Palace was a bummer for me. Went into my play of it with high expectations, and I know some people whose tastes I trust love this game.
Or you used to trust them.
Used to trust, that's right. My trust has been squandered. So it's getting really good reviews, and maybe I need to play it again, but I was disappointed by it. There's a lot going on, and it's just struck me as a sort of fiddly sort of game. Another issue I've had with this game, and I know others have talked about this, is the game sort of hinges on your ability to get inventions and to get inventors and sort of draw them and build them into your tableau. And the fact that the invention deck and the inventor deck are not tiered really bugged me. A lot of inventions and inventors, if you have both of them, they synergize really well, but because both decks are not tiered, they sort of come out at random, and there just doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason for an aspect of the game where so much hinges on it. It sort of just surprised me that in one round a invention could come out that can swing the game, and it just felt like if that had been tiered, if there had been some guidance to that, some cultivating to how those decks were constructed, it might have made for a better experience. But yeah, I'll definitely give it another try, but I was disappointed by my play of Crystal Palace.
So when we figured out that this was what we were going to be doing for the episode, I had one game that immediately sprung to mind for most disappointed, and this was Sanctum by CGE. Notably because I think in the lead up to the game's release, I liked the premise of the idea a lot. This is a game from a designer whose previous game, Adrenaline, I like a lot. The premise of CGE, a company who I generally have very high regards for, making a Diablo-style loot game, but in a Euro package, was very, very intriguing for me. I played this game at Gen Con. It seemed excellent, except the last third of the game either hadn't been figured out yet, or they weren't quite ready to show it yet. And therein sort of lies the clincher of my disappointment, which is that the last third of the game doesn't work. And it sort of undermines everything before it, because you're building up to this anticipatory, final boss fight that feels extremely underwhelming and kind of makes you feel that all of the build up to that point of acquiring items, acquiring equipment, acquiring armor just feels kind of meaningless. On top of that, I kind of felt like it just suffered from, in subsequent games, of not feeling substantively different in that initial 2/3 part. So all that you had to look forward to was the kind of weaker final third. I can't stress enough how vast the gulf between what I was hoping for from this game, especially after having demoed it, versus the experience I ended up getting was. It was just huge to me, especially for a game that, in terms of everything else, in terms of the production, is quite a nice, well-produced game. They kind of managed to create a cool product, but with an extremely, extremely underwhelming central design. CGE have since put out solo rules for this, which kind of has me half itching to at least try that, because I also think that the game really doesn't make much of being a multiplayer game at all, in that you're largely working entirely independently of each other. It almost feels like a game that should have been designed as a cooperative game and was turned into a competitive game at the last minute. So the idea of making a solo version of that maybe makes more sense. So I might still try that at some point, but I don't exactly have high expectations anymore for Sanctum. So next, we want to talk about games that we're excited to play in 2021. Looking forward, as we always do. And I think that this is going to be a mix of games that either are releasing in 2021 or games that we have unplayed. Kellen, what do you have on your list for the far-flung future of 2021?
Yeah, so the two for me are both 2020 releases that I just haven't gotten to and am excited to. The first one is easy. It's My City by Reiner Knizia. It is his take on a legacy game. I have it sitting in the closet. I keep getting tempted to say, well, Christina and I can just run it, and like that doesn't feel like I'm living up to both what would be best for the podcast, for us all to try it, but also what would be best for the game, which would be for us all to play it. Reiner Knizia, the only true and living Doctor, probably our favorite collective designer, taking on a legacy game, a format that doesn't really work, but maybe it can this time when the only true and living Doctor takes it on. The other one is a Kickstarter game that I didn't believe was good when it was on Kickstarter, even though it had a dearth of positive reviews. It is now just released into the wild, and it is getting positive reviews again. And so that double helping of positive reviews during the Kickstarter and now has me eager to check out Dwellings of Everdell. The production here is not to my taste. The production is clowns, vomiting color, and every different kind of component that you could possibly put in one picture with meeples and minis and game trays and aforementioned color everywhere. It is not to my taste. It is sort of to the taste of, like, I don't know, someone who uses the word production to mean as garish as humanly possible. But underneath all of that, it is cool looking. It is pretty, I guess. And it's supposedly a rock-solid worker placement game with some more attacky area control bits. A lot of love going around for Dwellings of Everdell. I am excited to
What it's worth, Kellen, I think you might have done this the first time as well, but you said Everdell, I think.
Eldervale. Yeah, I did. Well, Everdell. Dwellings of Eldervale. These names. But this is Dwellings of Eldervale, not Dwellings of Everdell. Eldervale. Eldervale. Thank you and good night.
A couple games I'm interested in. One is a 2020 release that I think has just come out is Merv, Heart of the Silk Road. Looks to be a fairly heavy economic game. Looks colorful. So it's one that I'm interested in playing. It's getting a lot of heat on BGG. The other game is a 2021 release from the late Chad Jensen, Dominant Species Marine. Promises to be Dominant Species, but in a tighter package. So I know that one of the big complaints about Dominant Species is that it just goes too long, and I totally understand that argument, although it doesn't detract from my enjoyment of it. The idea that there is a 2-hour version of Dominant Species out there sounds very, very exciting, because I think if you could cut the playing time of Dominant Species in half and make it an easier sell, that's just a really exciting proposition to me. So I'm very excited about the upcoming release of Chad Jensen's Dominant Species Marine.
The first game I want to talk about very quickly is a 2020 game that just got lost in the coronavirus shuffle. This is Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy. Now, I've played the first edition of Eclipse, and I think it's excellent.
I have this written down, Neelan. I have it written down as Eclipse Second Dawn for a New Day, Galaxy the First.
Something else?
Yes. Yeah. There's a couple of them in there. There's 2.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I think they should have used that title. They could have competed with Sidereal Confluence for best title, frankly. Eclipse is an excellent game. I played the first edition a couple of times and really loved it, so I eagerly backed the second edition, hoping to try this with both Mark and Kellen, who... Mark, correct me if I'm... You've not played this, is that right?
No, I've not.
So I picked this up hoping to play this with Mark and Kellen under the expectation that they would both really enjoy this. This is one of my favorite 4X experiences, but in a... much like Cthulhu Wars, in a Euro sort of framework that I think does a lot of cool things on the back end in terms of just like managing the pace of the game without it getting too out of hand. Where you're designing spaceships and just throwing them against battles each other, where you're just chucking a lot of dice. It's a really excellent production as well, and I can't wait to play that at some point in 2021. Kellen actually chose my other pick, which was Dwellings of Eldervale, so I'm going to pivot to Ankh, which is... and a game I'm very excited to play in 2021, assuming that comes out. This is the next game from Eric Lang in the Blood Rage Rising Sun arc.
One good, one bad arc.
What's that?
The one good, one bad.
One good, one bad? No.
Game trilogy.
The way that you have turned on Rising Sun is straight up disgraceful, Kellen. Rising Sun is still an excellent game, and I feel like I'm in an increasing minority on that position, but I still think Rising Sun is quite excellent. Ankh is the Egyptian mythology-themed game from Eric Lang, which is probably going to be one of the last games he worked on at CMON. And I'm excited to see how that plays out. You know, I don't love Blood Rage, but I'm a big fan of Rising Sun, so I kind of like the idea of him taking a broad premise and working it in different ways. If Blood Rage was the card drafting version of his Troops on the Map game, and Rising Sun was sort of intended to be the negotiation version of this, but maybe not quite as things panned out. Still an excellent action selection game. Ankh, I'm very intrigued to see what he does with it. Unlike Rising Sun, I did not read the rulebook for this, so I don't even know what to expect for it. I just like the way that it looks a whole lot. That is Ankh. And I think that with that, we're going to be done with the episode. Thank you all so much for listening. One quick note, this is going to be our last regular episode of the year before we get into our top 50 games of all time.
Boom.
Starting
Coming
next week. And I think one of the things that we're all excited is this is going to be the first year that the Blue Tank Christina is going to be joining us for the top 50. So it's going to be 5 big episodes with a whole lot of our favorite games. So please look forward to that to carry you into 2021. And I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for bearing with us in what has been a crazy year. You can follow us on all of our social media. That is on Facebook. That is Twitter at BRD Game Barrage. Or you can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. Thank you as always to Heart Society for our intro and outro music. What's on Your Mind, Kid? Goodbye.
See ya.
So long. Christina, you gotta come listen.
All right, I'm gonna get the medicine for the dog real quick. Be right back.
Oh no. Oh no. Future Mark, here is a message for you. Everything you've said so far we should cut out of the episode. This has been a message from Neelan.
Yeah. Try your best to do my accent. I dare you.
Try your... No.
Oh, wow.
Can't do it. Oh, wow. I can't even think of it. What is your accent?
I don't even know at this point.
Yeah.
It's funny because, sometimes when I hear myself speak on the podcast, I...
Recoil in horror?
Yeah, honestly. Because I do think it's so much less pronounced than it has been at points in the past.
It's possible that we've helped you overcome...
Overcome my accent like it was some sort of disability?
I don't know. Who could say? Uh-oh.
I thought you were going to talk it. He told me he was going to talk it, and I was like, well, that's dumb. It's really good. And I was going to come in like good cop, bad cop, Right. But all you said was positive things, so now I can't be like, hey, I heard from the corner that you were talking Cthulhu Wars, and I won't stand for it. Like, what's the angle? Why am I coming here?
All right. So my hot take, right, is that Cthulhu Wars is awesome. Cthulhu Wars Duel, a Sandy Peterson game, added decay, something that I don't want. It changed the way that you earn Doom, which I don't want, but it made it work for 2 players. What does that mean? Should I celebrate it because it's cheaper? Should I celebrate it because it's standees? I don't know. They didn't change the stupid monster's name. Shubby needs to get a new name. This guy was racist. Change the name. Why are we getting this? I don't get it. Sandy? Now, Christina.
Kellen.
Oh, you don't want to defend racism?
Okay, scoot over.
Uh-oh.
I love the fact that I'm bleeping, I think, Christina for the first time ever, and I'm doing it 3 times in this episode.
What did I say?
You said 3 times.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
He said talked at least once.
3 times.
I did?
gotta prac for this. I practiced stuff.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
I guess I was really mad.
Understandable. Understandable. No one's going to blame you.